Nicolas Cage's career took a turn for the worse in the second half of the '90s. Many of the actor's expensive films like Bangkok Dangerous, Lord of War, The Wicker Man or The Next began to fail mightily at the box office. However, Cage's box office successes still happened. In 2007, the sequel to National Treasure did great in theaters. And in 2009, was The Knowing directed by Alex Proyas. 2010 was a watershed year for Nicolas Cage. It was the last time he had a blockbuster budget at his disposal. The Sorcerer's Apprentice was entirely a Nicolas Cage project. He makes script for the film. After the crazy success of Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, all the Hollywood studios rushed in search of some fantasy books that could be turned into profitable franchises. True, almost all of these attempts were unsuccessful. However, Nicolas Cage didn't know about it, or just pretended not to notice it. With his clever idea that magic exists in real world, he came to his friend, producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who at that time was the most important producer in Hollywood. Bruckheimer and Cage worked together many times before. The Rock, Con Air, Gone in 60 Seconds, and National Treasure were big hits. It wasn't until 2009 that their movie failed in theaters. The G-Force performed mediocrely, but it's not Nicolas Cage's fault, who was responsible for voicing the guinea pig. Since the weight of Jerry Bruckheimer, on the wave of crazy success of the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy was very impressive, he easily found at Studio Disney budget of $150 million for the Cage idea. Nicolas was still considered a big star, though already a little shabby. Friends' plans were monumental. The Sorcerer's Apprentice was to be turned into a trilogy at once. Was even planned a full-length cartoon in the universe of the film. It should be noted here that Disney Studios, after the Pirates franchise, the first 3 films, which grossed almost $3 billion at the box office, invested in Bruckheimer's money without much interest in where they will be spent. Hollywood thought that Bruckheimer was golden unicorn. All this would eventually lead to a string of failures and a breakdown between the studio and the producer on The Lone Ranger. And the first impressive failure of Bruckheimer at Disney Studios would be The Sorcerer's Apprentice. The squandering of funds on the set of Sorcerer's Apprentice was enormous, and both Bruckheimer and Cage got the biggest royalties for themselves in those years. After Sorcerer's Apprentice, no one of them would ever earn that much. In the production of film, Cage tried to be man of the orchestra. He participated in writing the script, part-time producer, sat in the editing room and personally searched the Chinese flea markets for fancy pants for his character. But if the Van Damme at the dawn of his career could take on several positions at once and can rescue troubled movies, the Cage and the sunset of his career such trick failed. The movie didn't work out, but more accurately it didn't work out in the opinion of the test crew and the studio. After test screening, almost 30 minutes of the film was deleted. All this exploration of the mystical world that Cage was so interested in was left somewhere behind. The failure was very serious. At the U.S. box office, The Sorcerer's Apprentice took in only $63 million. The world gave another $152 million. But all that didn't even allow the production budget to be recouped. Cage and Bruckheimer were actively blamed the film's unfortunate release date. July was oversaturated with premieres aimed at children's audiences. Next to The Apprentice in theaters were 2 box office monsters, Despicable Me and Toy Story 3. Not yet out of the top 10 was the well-performed Karate Kid. And in the next row tried to keep afloat The Last Airbender, which also had a children's rating. What's more, Nicolas Cage started at the box office on the same day as Christopher Nolan's Inception, which clearly drew a more adult audience, who in theory could have gone to a new family movie. It really is a poor man's excuse. During the summer months, the U.S. box office is always jam-packed. And all of the movies named competed with each other, too, and only Nicolas Cage failed. The Last Airbender was also considered a flop, but it still made twice as much money as The Sorcerer's Apprentice. In general, the film became one of the main losers of the summer season of 2010. Nicolas Cage's career as a big star ended immediately. The actor lost a couple of lucrative contracts, and the budget for the second installment of Ghost Rider was quickly cut by $43 million. While the first Ghost Rider was a blockbuster, the sequel was already a movie in a different budget category. Immediately after The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Nicolas Cage cemented its success with 4 more consecutive failures. Drive Angry, Seeking Justice, Frozen Ground and Trespass sank at the box office. The films turned out pretty good, but they failed to make money. In 2012, mediocre performance at the box office and Ghost Rider 2. After which, in general, the Nicolas Cage career was over, and he began to appear in films that are hard to call films. The actor got a lot worse looking, and now look at him already frankly painful. But thanks to the action youth, Cage manages to star in 6, 7 and sometimes even 8 films a year. He gets for them, of course, not the same money they paid him in the 90s. But to repay debts, they probably allow. Success of The Sorcerer's Apprentice could have saved Cage's career. If the film had bounced back and the studio began work on a sequel, as unlikely Nicolas would have so quickly found himself in uncategorized films, and maybe not even got there at all. The last bright spot in the actor's filmography, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, in which Cage plays himself. Jean-Claude Van Damme has tried a similar trick before. The movie about Cage's talent turned out well, but it's not enough to save the former star. Thanks for listening. Subscribe and stay tuned.